Well, welcome back to the small business mindset. One of the things that I deal with in my commercial real estate business, I work with small business owners. And the joy that I get is when they occupy space, which many business owners do. Not everyone works remotely, but more than likely, if you own a business, you have to occupy space, whether it's a retail storefront or an industrial space or garage, or I mean, you name it. The buildings and the spaces that we occupy are important in how we run our business. What I love to do is when someone's been a tenant in the space, renting space for a number of years, and they're ready to take the leap into building ownership, which is one way they can not only expand their footprint for their business, but it's a way for them to grow wealth for them personally and for their business. Now, the challenge I found in the last number of years is I have a number of business owners that have a desire to buy a building. The building inventory does not exist. And so then gets us into the conversation of what would it take to build a building, develop a building from the ground up? What are those costs? What are the process? And I'll be honest with you, a lot of business owners, their wheelhouse is not in real estate development, which is why my guest is here today. I want to introduce you to Lance Johnson. He is an engineer with Bartlett West Engineering. He has a breadth of experience in working with, businesses and individuals across the country, from ground up construction to just thinking about what development looks like from all aspects. In fact, I worked with their firm most recently helping develop a childcare center where we took an existing building and redeveloped it from medical office into childcare. So it's really been a cool process. So Lance, welcome to the Small Business Mindset.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. And I know you
Yeah.
and I have talked and collaborated over time just to talk about all kinds of different projects. But I think
Mhm.
for our audience today, I'm gonna ask you a question to start things off. If you could give business owners one piece of advice before starting a build, what would that be?
Before
Just one.
starting a build, yeah, just one. And it's going to sound so obvious to probably everybody, but plan, proper planning.
Right.
I was thinking, I just recently took a vacation, a trip with my middle daughter, and we just winged it. And it turned out great. Uh, there were some things that I didn't allow for enough time to maybe take care of. So some goals that by winging it, I wasn't able to do.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun, kind of a serendipitous path that we took, a long drive. But my point being is if you don't do the proper planning, there's a good chance you're setting yourself up to not achieve what you're wanting to achieve during that, let's call it the project, the build.
Right.
So I just can't stress enough the design and planning upfront. Spend that intentional time.
hmm And I know a lot of my clients sometimes I'll ask them their space needs, like, okay, how many office spaces do you need? Ceiling height, parking lot, all that kind of stuff. But what are the other things in addition to the physical space on the inside that they need to be thinking about on the outside?
Well, and so, yeah, and before you go there, some people are always thinking about today, or the next
Yeah.
couple of weeks or the next month. But where are they going to? What's going to look like in a couple of years? You've nailed and touched upon something that a lot of people think about the finish, but sometimes they don't think, and I call it the boring. And this is the engineer and contractor in me that comes out that thinks about the grade, where's it draining, the foundation, the structure, how's it built, what's it built of, and HVAC, again, plumbing, boring stuff. But those are high dollar items that can cause a lot of problems.
Mhm.
It's a lot easier to rip out carpet or change the paint than it is to tear out a sewer, and put a new one in, or a cracked foundation. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And kind of on that topic, you kind of brought up, those infrastructure costs can be very costly, absolutely,
mhm.
especially in the commercial environment. So where should business owners spend money? I mean, what should they truly thinking about, to be strategic with their planning process?
Yeah. It- so as a civil engineer, I always start with the dirt, and so looking at the site first. So you talked about new build. You're talking a couple different things: new build versus existing space. So if you're going out and
Right.
doing new build, it starts with what the characteristics of the site. So I immediately start looking at that, how it drains, and those kind of things.
Mhm.
But then let's build a building. So then you're getting into the foundation. Uh, Again, can be very costly if you don't do it right. So foundation and structure. So what's it? The materials. What are you making it out of? how long will those materials last? Sometimes people think, hey, I want to save a few dollars here or there because, upfront, it's a big number.
Yeah.
But over time, and especially if you're using debt or some financing, you can potentially spread those costs out over many years.
Mhm.
But a lot of people don't think about their maintenance costs and what that's going to cost on an annual basis. And that's real cash out of your business. So new builds, I look at them a little different. You're starting a lot earlier, again, from the dirt. So let's go into an existing space. Again, analyzing what kind of structure do you have there. Walking around the building, again, looking at drainage, making sure things look okay. We're not flowing water toward the building. What kind of roof do you have? Potential water can cause a lot of damage, as you probably know, in all the properties you're dealing with, just leaks and things like that. So if you can really keep it dry and keep it secure, that's the first thing and the main thing I look for. And then inside, you can do about anything. What I'm going to tell you is I look for spend the money, make sure you do right on the things that you don't want to tear out.
Right.
Because tearing stuff out's not easy.
Oh, absolutely. And I talk to my clients a lot about like, let's address the unsexy things.
Unfortunately, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember recently I took a couple clients through a building that I think has a great location. It has great visibility from a, signage perspective and getting people to find their new location. It checked a lot of boxes. But I think what scared them and the reason why they didn't move forward just yet is that, okay, so the price of the building was right, but it needed just as much in renovation, and there was a crack in the foundation, and it freaked them out. And so I think for them, their comfort level wasn't there because they've never done this before. But walk me through, and I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. Have you worked with clients before, or maybe projects yourself, where you've encountered kind of a hairy property? It wasn't pretty, but you saw the potential and what things that should be red flags. And so I'll give you an example. This particular building was around $300,000, and it would take probably another $300,000 to renovate. But from a real estate perspective, and granted, they were more concerned with the aesthetics. They wanted to get rid of the popcorn ceilings, and they wanted to maybe open up the space and stuff like that. But I saw it more as, okay, if your all-in investment is $600,000, which actually was in their budget, then I believe if they could do that and bring it back to the market, it will be $1 million building. So I saw the upside, but I think where they got kind of stars in their eyes, you're like, oh, but what if we do this and this and this and this? I mean, how should they approach those things to, make good decisions?
Yeah. Well, it really gets back to you can potentially spend good money after bad. And if you can't cover up problems that potentially, so as an example, maybe your example, and I'm just going to use it. If there's a crack in the foundation, you say, oh, we can put some leveler in there and put some tile over that or whatever, flooring, say your roof. It looks okay right now, but we don't want to spend any money on that roof, or it's questionable. So you put all your really nice finish in it, and you get it where you want it, and then that crack in that foundation propagates, comes through, and all of a sudden your tiles popping, or your floor's uneven, and you say, "Gosh, we put all this flooring in." Same thing with the roof. You start noticing some leaks, and now not only have you damaged your interior finish, but so all that money you spent let's call it renovating, making it nice. The bones, if you will, the structure is it's fighting against you. So at some point in time, it either makes sense to just tear it down and start fresh. So going back to, if I'm looking at an existing building and you're talking about, yes, I've seen some nasty, buildings that you walk in and go, no way. It's really easy. It's amazing. People sometimes have a hard time seeing that. And here's the engineer in me. And this is probably the ego. Engineers, we can do anything if we have enough money. So, but a lot of times you walk into a building like that, and it doesn't take that much to gut it. Let's call it clear it out. But again, what are you then left with? And if you're still chasing that problem down to the plumbing and the foundation, those kind of structurally, it might make sense just to knock it down.
And I'm assuming these are things, so as as business owners are considering an existing property, an engineer can walk through with them and kind
Yeah.
of point out these, these red flags like, hey, we want to make aware of that. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, yeah. So back to that planning. There are people out there like myself but engineers that look for those, let's call it the boring, the not sexy stuff.
Yeah.
We're experts in those kind of things. Same thing, architects, and they're good at that shiny, what's it going to look like, and really get that advice. But
Mhm. Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. So what questions should every business owner ask their engineer, but they usually don't? And I know we've kind of covered a lot of those topics, but I mean, and you've worked on projects, I mean, a variety of things from, things under the ground to things above the ground, all that kind of
yeah,
stuff. But
um, probably most people don't say how. What if I were to spend more? Or most people are chasing how. I hate to use the word cheap, but how inexpensive or how low
right.
can we get the budget, right? We're always kind of chasing that. And it's totally understandable. I do the same thing. But most people aren't going into it looking, well, gosh, if we spent a few more dollars here and let's call it beefed this up, or that would pay dividends probably down the road on maintenance costs. So I think sometimes people are more focused on the now and trying to get that budget low as you can, but they're not thinking ahead. So to boil it into a question, how can I spend more? Which is counterintuitive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The other question I get a lot from clients is, is it, and I know the answer to this, you probably already know the answer to this too. Is it less expensive to buy existing and renovate or build from the ground up? And I know that's subjective, but what
Mhm.
is your experience seeing that, is there a rule across the board?
No,
That's a good
no,
question.
it is it is a great question. That's most of the time it comes down to that. And you really have to run
Yeah.
an analysis because time factors into that,
Oh, good point.
and certainty. So
Mhm.
construction process isn't for everyone. And so, in real estate, a lot of times we always say, so in the development world, if we're going to go out new project, we always say it's a couple years. So the day you think of it and come up with the idea, it's probably at least a couple years before you would see any income from that. And so there's a lot of factors you cannot control during that time, like interest rates, market conditions, and uncertainty. So
Mhm.
how do you feel when you go to bed at night? Your head on the pillow. What keeps you up? So back to existing space. So your question, chicken or egg?
Yeah.
It is really a chicken or egg question, but there's a lot more to it. There's time, certainty, comfort that can go into that. Sometimes when you can see it and it's there, and you can identify the problems, you're so much closer to a finish line than if you're starting from scratch. Um, so
You bring up a good aspect of the time. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're absolutely right. I think, you know, a lot of times business owners, they can say like, hey, I see it, I want it now, I needed it yesterday, what does that
mhm.
look like, and it's hard sometimes to get your head out of your business long enough. Let's say you're a
Yeah,
medical doctor. I mean, you're treating patients all day long, you're really not thinking about your space needs until it comes to a crucial point where you're like, we're out of space. I mean, we're double booking, we're cramming people where we need
yeah,
to, you
right.
know
And sometimes that you're exactly right, and it goes back to that planning. That all of a sudden you wake up one day and go, "Gosh, we're going to need space in 6 months." So
yeah.
sometimes you just do not have the time for a new build, and
Yeah.
other factors. I was just thinking. Usually on new build, you're dealing with approval process. I mean, you're dealing with it in same regards from a tenant finish. You've got to go in sometimes change of use, but again, a lot smaller, less probably moving parts than if you're going to start from scratch, especially if you got to rezone, those type
Mhm.
of things. That can take time,
Right.
and there's a lot of uncertainty. So
You brought up something
sorry
too
I
that I think
couldn't sorry I couldn't answer
oh,
more
no,
expensive
no.
or
No,
less,
and I think
but
it's
yeah,
subjective.
yeah,
I do get calls on occasion where I might have a industrial user. So they have
yeah,
warehouse space, and our market right now has been so light on that. I mean, our vacancy rate has been so low, which we need more of that smaller-ish, 5,000 square feet or so shop space. And I get, whether it's a plumber, an electrician, or a carpenter, somebody in that world, like, I'll just go out and build a little metal building. That can't cost very much. And this, the challenging thing is that I see where, I mean, theoretically you wouldn't think. In fact, we live
Right.
in the country. We have a mortgage building on our property, and it's a metal building, which is a very different kind of use because there's not infrastructure in that building. And I think the surprise is that costs have gone up. So historically, what have you seen over the years that you've been working in this field? It's like, you know, what are, and I can't think of how to phrase this, but different economic times. What has construction prices done since COVID? What were we seeing pre-COVID? Are we seeing ebbs and flows? Do you think it's going to come down? What are we seeing?
So
Ah,
you just use the magic word COVID,
yeah.
and because that's kind of a timely marker, really, that what we've can benchmark before and then after. We probably saw after COVID across the board probably 30 to 35% increase in prices. I want to say just anecdotally, I remember we could go look at commercial buildings and figure $150 to $200, say, a square foot.
Mhm.
Now it's not surprising, or it's pretty normal to see $300 to $400 a foot.
Mhm.
Again, a lot in that to unpack as far as apples to
Yeah.
apples, right? But just
Yep.
in general, you could usually, if you're having lunch with somebody and somebody says, I got an idea, you could get the napkin out and probably throw down 150 to $200.
Yeah.
But now that's about double.
Yeah.
So just in general, so your question, have they gone up? Absolutely. A lot, yes. Do we see them going down? Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
It would be great if they would. But as you know, it's all tied to a market that for that to happen, there'd probably be a lot of other pain points for, valuations potentially go down. You just all that kind of things that are tied to it. But
Absolutely.
maybe it stabilizes. We've seen it stabilize. So, it really took off like a hockey stick, took
Right.
off after COVID, but we've seen
Because
it
of
more.
supply chains, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so now the tariffs, that's been something this year that has caused a lot of to pause, let's call it that. We've seen projects get paused or delayed or pushed back. Just because of the uncertainty of materials, we see suppliers not holding prices as long. So it used to be if a subcontractor gave you a price, they might say it's good for 90 days. Now they may say it's good for a week. And there's some that may
Wow. Yeah.
some may say it's good like right now if you call
Yeah.
me. So we've seen a lot of that. So again, back to uncertainty.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I'm seeing, and I would love to hear your experience with this too, is repurposing properties. So, like, for example, we haven't experienced this as much in the Midwest, but on the coast, you see large office buildings that aren't being used again as office buildings. Maybe they're being repurposed into multifamily. What
Yep.
other alternate, uses are people getting creative with? Thinking about, okay, there isn't a market or there isn't inventory in my market for this type of property, but if I look at this one over here, maybe I can rework it. Have you seen much of that?
Yeah. You, it's probably a lot to do with housing. So converting, like you said, office to housing.
Yeah.
Um, we've seen schools, churches, hotels.
What about shopping malls?
Yeah,
Kind
shopping.
of, yeah,
And they've
yeah,
given. That's exactly. Yep.
yeah. Converted to
Yeah.
housing. That's really fascinating. And I think
Yeah.
I love repurposing buildings, but trying to
Oh
think
yeah.
about the is, yeah, it's a
Well,
challenge.
again, so in the broader picture, for a community, and when you talk about development, a lot of times
Mhm.
you'll hear people say, "Why do we have to go outside, or let's call it the green field? Why do we have to grow out when we've got a lot of we could infill, right?
Right.
Where you already have utilities and infrastructure. So
Mhm.
it makes a lot of sense to try to repurpose when you've got that community around it. There's I think a lot of attraction to that too, because you can also see what's around you. Sometimes when you're the first one out there on the edge of town, you don't know. So if you're a business and you go out there and build something, so let's call it in a cornfield, you don't know what that's going to look like 10, 20 years, but more infill you do. So we see a lot of that. And I think it's a great idea to try to reuse.
Yeah. What are some challenges you see though with infill? I mean, theoretically, if you say, oh, I have an old warehouse building in this part of town, nobody wants to warehouse there anymore because maybe the ceiling heights aren't as high or the access isn't great, but, converting that to something else, what are challenges that owners or developers would see?
Well, kind of back to, hey, knowing what's around you. Well, everybody that's lived around that business over time, or that property, whatever that property was used for, they got used to it. And a lot of times that neighborhood doesn't want to see it change. And so, the uncertainty, I think a lot of times it's the uncertainty of what's going to go there. And then even when you propose it, you can show people, again, you still don't know. You know what you've lived with, and you got used to it, the pattern, the traffic patterns, the people, the lights, whatever. But going forward, I think that's uncertainty, or even for some fear. I mean, how's that going to affect my life, my property values, and those kind of things? So I think infill is challenging, or a big challenge of that is because of that. You do now have people living around that piece of property, and it affects their life.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
How can owners protect themselves without slowing projects down? I mean, when they are going through that,
right. Yeah.
my first capitalized.
To me, it sounds like, oh, get insured and those kind of things. That doesn't slow it down. It really comes back to, it's going to sound like a broken record, but proper planning. You as much as you can. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So you as a business owner may say, well, I am going to plan. I am planning. I'm going to get my executive committee. We're going to sit down and we're going to plan. That's great. But it's kind of like me planning my trip, right? If I would have called a travel agent and they could have helped me, right? They know a lot of those. So I go back to try to work with some people that could be trusted advisors that can, that know what you don't know, and that are subject matter experts. And a lot of people, I think, potentially avoid doing that. Maybe just one, they don't know. They maybe don't have a contact. They just don't know. But two, it's going to cost me. Gosh, I don't want to spend that kind of money. That type of thing. And I would tell you it's not, again, for what you're spending and what you're teeing up, you're going to invest potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions maybe, and a few $1,000s up front to make sure you get on the right path. That's my recommendation. Yeah.
Who should, okay, so let's say we're going to do an example. Let's say I am an office user and I'm like, okay, I'm looking to expand and I'm going to buy an existing building and it has a lot of hair on it. Let's say it's like the one I just mentioned earlier. Who do I need to have on my team? I mean, so I have an engineer, but who else needs to be at the table as we kind of work through this discussion?
Yep. I would, existing building, I'd want an engineer probably that can bring a structural or a mechanical, HVAC, MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing expertise. So structural, MEP, architect. I was going to say banker, but most likely I'd assume you probably have finance, or at some point just get
on the team. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Contractor, a general contractor, or you could have a subcontractor, but contractor, architect, engineer would be ideal. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great team to have. And, I know in my experience, I know you've worked with them a lot more than I have. It's like the communication between all those parties, I think, is key.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Getting comfortable with that process and one hand you talk to the other and everything.
And you want you want your team to get along. Yeah. I was at conference one time, and the city manager got up and they asked him, "What's your number one fear of using let's call it a design build team?" And usually, Kirsten, so usually the design build, what you're promoting there is a one point of contact. You're all together, you're aligned. And the biggest fear was, what happens if something goes wrong? Or what happens if the team breaks up mid-project? So back to your point, you want your team to you communicate. That's you've got it. It's number one. They got to communicate. So they got to like each other, so they'll communicate.
What are some expectations? So let's say, it's my business and I'm hired a design build team. So I have the engineering and the architects and the contractors, I have my banker, we're all ready to go. Mm-hmm. What's the expectation from what are the next steps? I mean, walk me through. Is it signing a contract? Is it making a deposit? What does the process look like?
So you said you've already got your architect. So you've got your team. Yeah. You know who you want to do, or who you want to work with, and you have a project already. You have a building, or you got.
Say we've identified the lot or the building. Okay, we're ready to go. So you put a proposal together. What are the next steps?
The next step is usually you sit down. We call it a kickoff meeting, but you're at really concept level, kind of napkin concept level. Mm-hmm. And we sit around a table and walk through and really talk to that business owner and listen to what their needs are and what they're wanting to accomplish. And sometimes it's again, when you get back to, I want it on budget and I need it in 4 weeks, 4 months, whatever that is. But what's interesting, as you keep listening and hearing it, things will come out that on the surface are not maybe there, that maybe rather than just an arbitrary schedule, and it's not even a move-in date that they have to, but maybe it's, I don't know, making it up, but they're going on, their kids getting married, and they just absolutely, they're going to be out of country from us, so it absolutely dead stop has to be done by a certain date. I mean, just little things, or I want to incorporate, I need this kind of air conditioning, not because I want to spend more of that, but it's because these are the type of customers and use that we have, that it means a lot to us to have the extra. So there's a lot to unpack in that. And that's what we listen for, the architects and the engineer. We try to listen for that because a lot of times that's under the surface of, hey, I just need it built by this date for this much. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more there. And trying to understand what your business is. Who's your customer?
Yeah. And I've only built for myself, we've only built a house. And I know going through that process was fun and exciting. I had my bulletin board before Pinterest was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
What I wanted.
Yeah.
But I know I always appreciate when my contractor or my architect is suggesting things like, hey, have you thought about that? Have you thought about this? And when we went through the process ourselves, they didn't suggest. They were just like, okay, well, that's what you want. I'm like, okay. And
Yeah, and that's sit around that table, and then we're, our heads, the gears are going in our head thinking, okay, we're thinking steps ahead of, there might be something you want to do. We still got to get it approved, right? We got to get a building permit. So is that possible? So we're kind of looking down some different roads of process, if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is really great advice. So last question I'm going to ask you, and I think we covered some of this. What does thinking long-term really look like in development?
Yeah. And, I thought about this long-term, gosh, that can mean a lot of different things to people. To me, thinking long-term is again, kind of back to where we started, that it's not sacrificing the upfront or the quick, let's call it. So don't sacrifice long-term for the short term. So if you are looking to invest, this is potentially one of your largest investments other than maybe your business, but it's a big deal. That's where your employees and people are. That's where your customers come. So I'm thinking long-term for ensuring myself by spending the money up front, not having to spend it over the years to fix things. So something that's going to last. So because I was going to say, what is long term? It's long term to me. To some people, it depends on what you're talking about, right? 2 years, 20 years, 30 years. But again, I think sometimes we maybe forget about the maintenance costs, and those really can add up. So long term to me is something that's going to be durable, sustainable, going to last.
Right. Right. And ultimately work for your business.
Yeah. Examples in my work, again, asphalt versus concrete streets. Neither one's better. It's just asphalt's generally less expensive to put in. You'll spend less to put it in up front. Concrete's more expensive. But maintenance costs on those two items are different. You'll spend more maintaining asphalt than you will concrete. Concrete's got a longer last. So just things like that. The roofing materials, you can pick different roofing materials that have different lives. So
that makes sense. Yeah. I recently met with a client who's a manufacturer. And when they first reached out to me, they're like, we need at least 12,000 square feet. It's like, and I said, okay, why? Why 12,000
great question.
square feet? Yeah.
Great question.
And so, well, because we have a new piece of machinery that is 6,000 square feet or whatever it was. And as we got to investigating a little bit more, and I mean, I am by no means a specialist in measuring equipment for buildings, but I asked some clarifying questions. It's like, okay, tell me the dimensions of this equipment. Does the equipment have to go all in one line? Can it curve around? And so thankfully, they hadn't even thought about that. They were just told by the manufacturer, the piece of equipment, 6,000 square feet, you need double the space for, employees or box, whatever it is, logistics like that. And I think, you're probably in the same world. It's like, they don't know what they don't know enough to figure out, okay, what truly are your needs? Because realistically, there wasn't a 12,000 square foot building available in our market, and they weren't in a position where they could build ground up. They said, we're still in a mode where we need to be a tenant in a space, but we're.
So, well, and you bring up a good point. So potentially you find a space that fits them day one that can house it. They're thinking, maybe they're already thinking 5 years ahead, but right now what gets them? So then you start looking at the site. Could we eventually expand, as you grow? Same thing, the opposite direction, that say somebody says, we need 3,000 square feet right now, but we know, say in the next 5 years, we're going to double or triple that. Okay. So either we're building a building or looking for a building, but maybe only finish the space you need. Sometimes, so you've already paid for the ground, you've paid probably for all the parking, your utility extensions, they're there. Sometimes it might make sense to build the structure, get it, but you only finish 3,000 feet, and either you white box or you just keep it unfinished. So that way, it's a lot cheaper when you do decide to expand, because it'll only get more expensive versus just go build a 3,000 square foot standalone and then 5 years from now say, let's now add on. Costs have gone up. Yeah. So just other things like that. Yep.
That's really great advice. I also get a question from a lot of clients to say, okay, I only need 3,000 square feet, but should I build 5 or 10,000 square feet and then try to lease it up and have the flexibility? And I always recommend that. If it makes sense for them, financially, because you're absolutely right. It's like maximize your footprint now if you can.
Yes.
And then finish out the space later, because needs might change.
Yep. It's amazing also how much, at least me and our family, we always need more storage. I mean, we can use the room. Yeah. Somehow you can always use that room.
It's like,
you fill it in some way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know. Finding that out too. Lance, thanks for your time today. This has been a good conversation. I think some good, meat to the conversation to allow business owners to really consider what it looks like to develop either a standalone property, an existing property, or to go out and build their own, and what things to consider. So any, ending thoughts that you want to share with our group?
No, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. I enjoy your show, our podcast. And I would just say I've grown up around, my whole life has been around construction, since I can really remember back. And I love it. And it's, to me, it's pretty natural, I guess, if you will. And so sometimes I forget that others don't see it maybe the same way or aren't looking. And I would just recommend, reach out and don't be intimidated by reaching out to somebody. I don't think anybody ever charges for a consultation or sit down, let's talk about your idea. And you can get a lot by just doing that. Having some initial meetings with different architects, different engineers. You can get a lot of information by just doing that. So again, I would be, if anybody wants to reach out, glad to point you in the right direction, really. So thank you for
Love
this.
it. And I will make sure and include your information in the show notes on how they can get in touch with you. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day.